What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and we're talking about some more Warhammer 40k leaks today. I feel like I'm becoming one of those YouTube channels that just posts every day about, like, something sort of inane that happens in the 40k community. But the leak season right now is insane for competitive Warhammer 40,000, and what we're going to be talking about today is a Warhammer community article that was accidentally posted a couple days early. It was taken down very quickly, and unfortunately no real concrete information could be taken from the article. All right, editing Trevi here. I'm going to be honest with you. Today's news has been an absolute roller coaster. I recorded this entire video, edited it, was ready to go, hit export, and as I did, some additional leaks came out from this particular news article. So what I'm going to do is present to you the first part of the video as it was originally intended, and afterwards present to you some of the additional details that we've gotten about this leak, as well as my thoughts on those too. So stay tuned for those. I hopefully am caught up with everything. Hopefully nothing else comes up before this video gets edited, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's a bit of a roller coaster. But instead, what we get is an inkling at how competitive balance is going to be working, at least in the foreseeable future for Warhammer 40,000. If you haven't been paying attention, 40k is being absolutely dominated by really two armies right now. It's Adeptus Custodes and Tau. Tyranids are kind of the third wheel faction right now. They have a pretty good matchup into Adeptus Custodes, which is keeping them relevant, but their game against Tau is almost unplayable. And so while Tyranids do have some decent competitive showings, if they hit bad matchups, they do tend to go down pretty early. That said, this trifecta of factions is pretty much destroying the balance of the competitive metagame. And unfortunately, basically no other factions are allowed to win or even get close to top tables in a lot of circumstances. So with their new apparent commitment to game balance, Games Workshop is releasing essentially a hotfix for the metagame. So we have this article here, which is dated the 15th of March. So that's going to be next Tuesday. This was posted 4 days early. We're making the video on March 11th. And talk about these limited requisition restrictions for the Warzone Nachmund competitive season. Essentially, all we have are screenshots of the article at this stage. Unfortunately, there is supposed to be sort of a data slate update, but that file either wasn't posted or wasn't downloaded or was deleted very quickly. So unfortunately, we don't have that yet, but we do get a little bit of a sneak peek at exactly what's going to be happening. The article talks about how two factions, maybe three, like I talked about, Tau and Adeptus Custodes, as well as maybe Tyranids, specifically Crusher Stampede, are sort of dominating everything. We haven't really seen the impact of Eldari on the metagame. Obviously, they only released last week, so they haven't really been played in GTs. I don't know how they're going to interact with that paradigm, but I'm sure they'll also make a little bit of a splash, although I think that, to be fair, part of the impetus for releasing this change at this stage is because that new Eldari Codex came out, and it probably isn't garnering as much attention as it normally would, given the fact that the other factions at the top level are so much more powerful than basically everything else being released. The article talks about how new codexes, campaign books, articles, and other rule sets are released all the time, and some of them are broken. This is a mea culpa from GW, which I guess I appreciate. And they talk about that in an effort to maintain balance in a thematic way, what they're going to be trying to do is limit the resources that players have to play with in the Nachmund season. Now, in the last screenshot here, they give a couple details on how this is going to happen, but the hints are pretty intense. They talk about how this article is going to release an update to the balance data slate update. They use update twice, which is a little funky. So I guess the plan will be to release quarterly balance data slates, but then also address them in a more living rule set style, which I think is definitely the way to go, and certainly what people have been asking for Warhammer to do for a long time, because they've been so tied to the Codex release cycle that being able to dynamically edit the balance of the game has been basically impossible for the design team. They talk about how these updates are going to happen quarterly alongside the balance data slates. So I guess we'll get the quarterly balance data slate, and then we'll, in addition, so 8 times per year, I guess, we will also get this update to it. This next clause talks about exactly how these balance changes are going to be implemented, and it's sort of insane. So I'll just read it out verbatim for you. Each quarter, alongside the balance data slate, you will also now receive a direct transmission from the active war zone. This will detail the difficulty in requisitioning certain units in larger numbers, or even getting any at all, and will be used in addition to the detachment rules to create your armies. They note down here that as with all Warhammer rules, if you're not in an official Games Workshop event, the balance changes are optional. That's kind of boilerplate. I mean, competitive play is basically going to be using whatever the current matched play and competitive play rules from Games Workshop are. Any rules that are in the current version of GT, and for the most part used in a US Open, are probably going to be adopted by the majority of the competitive community. But it is important to note that if you're just playing at your local game store and you and your opponent are having a fun time, you don't necessarily need to worry about these. That sentence above, though, sounds absolutely transformative for Warhammer 40k. It sounds like the detail in requisitioning certain units in larger numbers means that we may be getting more aggressive restrictions on duplicates of particular units. So if we remember back to previous data slate updates, we got the rule of 1 for orc buggy units, meaning that each incarnation of orc buggies could only be included once per army. In addition, we also got the cap of 2 on aircraft units, so you could only have 2 aircraft in each of your armies as well. This may be expanded to more units across the breadth of factions, or as an alternative, I kind of hope we see scaling points values for units. So as units are included in larger numbers, their points cost increases. You can envision units like Virtus Praetors or Crisis Battlesuits in Tau or Custodes armies, very efficient units that are taking in large numbers. You don't necessarily want to edit the baseline points cost of that unit, but taking a second version of them could be 5 or 10 points more per model. Taking a third could be 10 or 15 more points per model. Something like that, similar to how the Tau weapon subsystems work on those Crisis Battlesuits, and actually introduce some additional decision-making in the list construction phase. The part that's kind of scaring me, or to some extent getting me a little bit excited, is this sentence right here where they mention that some units may not be able to be requisitioned at all. Meaning that, guys, we may be getting a 40k ban list. This is something that Games Workshop has basically never done before. It's always been an adage of the company, and this has been something that's shared pretty widely amongst a large portion of the miniature gaming community, where unlike a trading card that will rotate out of a format, your models will be evergreen. And that's something that it sounds like Games Workshop, at least for competitive play, and I do have to stress that, this is specifically going to be for competitive play in tournaments. It sounds like that might no longer be true, at least for some units and to some extent. I imagine that this is something that will change from season to season, so especially if we're getting seasons on a biannual basis, your units will probably only be affected by this for a 6-month period before maybe they're hit by a data slate if they're too powerful. But I think this has some pretty far-reaching implications and has the potential to really repair a lot of the unhealthiness of the current 40k metagame. We'll just have to wait until Tuesday to see exactly how this gets implemented, but I did want to talk about it to steel people from what might be happening to Warhammer 40k tournament play, because this is an enormous change if it has the implications that I assume it does. 40k ban list or restricted list is, something that I've been kind of asking for a really long time. I would prefer that everything just be balanced out of the gate, but I also understand that, especially in a miniatures game as broad as Warhammer 40,000, that's almost going to be impossible. There are hundreds of data sheets to try to, and making everyone perfectly balanced is just literally impossible. At the very least, restricting use of those models for short periods of time while the balance team could get around and produce a revision of those rules. So in the meantime, the competitive metagame isn't being absolutely destroyed by whatever data sheet slipped through the development team the last time around. Definitely feels like it could improve 40k for the better. Anyway, let me know down in the comments what you think about this potential changes. I'm excited for it, and I'm excited to see what it brings, and Tuesday can't come fast enough. All right, so here are some of the additional leaks that we got from this article that came out after I recorded all of my thoughts about this video. It's a hard knock life being a Warhammer 40,000 YouTuber. So what we got was a screenshot of what is allegedly the bottom of the article, where some of the most important, impactful changes in this document are being recapped. We can see that, assuming this screenshot is correct, the idea that some units are being restricted to either cap the number of times they can be included in a list, or to disallow them entirely. We can see the top of the summary images here, restricting both Crisis Battlesuits and Crisis Bodyguards to a single unit in each army. This I'm not 100% sure about, and I am taking this leak with a little bit of a grain of salt because that does seem a little bit over the top to me. Tau Empire have been winning a lot, but in my opinion, the reason for their success is not Crisis battlesuits. I think Crisis battlesuits are a little bit too much of an efficient platform, but if anything, their weapon options are a little bit too, and their access to rerolls is a little bit too easy, but the Crisis battlesuit itself is not an issue. Broadside battlesuits, on the other hand, maybe we ban those guys. We can also see that Virtus Praetors are being limited to a maximum of 2 units. Not the biggest change since a lot of lists were already taking 2 units, but if we look at the text up top, it does imply that Trajan is being temporarily banned from competitive play. That is a transformative change for Adeptus Custodes. Trajan is certainly the most powerful unit in their codex, if only because of his force multiplication effects. And without him, those Virtus Praetor units that are also being similarly limited are significantly less powerful. I would much rather have seen a significant points increase on Trajan, as I think part of his strength is that his points cost is sort of ludicrously low. An outright ban on him sounds pretty ham-fisted. Given that this leak came out significantly after the other screenshots that we saw from this article, I trust it a little bit less. Although if it were to be a Photoshop job, it's a pretty good one. I suppose we'll just have to wait until Tuesday to find out for sure. Despite the fact that Tau and Custodes are super powerful, I kind of hope that these changes aren't the ones that are being made. A limit on Virtus Praetors doesn't seem too bad for me, but a limit on Crisis battlesuit seems kind of flabbergasting, especially since Games Workshop's internal design for the Tau Codex is heavily reliant on Crisis battlesuits. So being only able to take a single unit of them plus a unit of bodyguards is, I don't know, it's a lot of restriction. Anyway, we'll have to see. I'm kind of excited for it, and it definitely promises to be a big change for the Warhammer 40k meta. Also, there's this screenshot that promises to impose a restriction on the number of dedicated transports that can be taken in an army, up to probably 4 for a Strike Force game, which sounds totally plausible. I think that's a change that probably needed to have been made a year ago, since dedicated transport-focused armies have constantly been a problem off and on if a too powerful dedicated transport is ever printed. So this one I actually do hope is real. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video, everybody. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.